This brings us to the concept of, how much of this is instinct and how much of it is learned.
Mhm.
Presumably there's some amount of both, but a lot of this is probably pretty instinctive because when the mothers have their first litter, they do all these things. The mice aren't going to, maternal care classes or, calling up their grandma and asking her how to do things. How much of this maternal care behavior is instinctive? How much of it is learned? And how do we start to study that in the lab?
And I think about this a lot and have done work to address this question really over the course of my career. But the way I like to describe it is I think about capacity for care as innate, but the caregiving behaviors themselves have to be turned on. And so I imagine that the sort of circuitry is there. We know that this from research that the circuitry is there. The circuitry is highly conserved in males and in females and across species. And yet, whether or not caregiving behavior will occur depends oftentimes on hormone context, social experience, variability across species. Some species are relatively responsive to infants, regardless of their life experiences or whether they've had exposure to pregnancy hormones. Other times, certain species are really reliant on hormonal changes that happen really right around the time of birth to synchronize the onset of care. And then, even though these behaviors are turned on at the time of birth, and it really does sort of look like this magic switch, there's still learning that's occurring.
Right.
And actually, I think about those hormonal changes around the time of birth as really being this sort of really allowing the experience of interacting with infants to produce these long-term changes. So it's
Right.
it's a facilitatory effect. It's not an automatic effect. So, for example, if in rats, where you really need hormonal changes in order to get a relatively quick display of caregiving behavior, if you allow females to experience pregnancy and birth, but you immediately separate them from their infants, and then you give infants back to see if they'll display caregiving behaviors, they look just like a virgin female. So
Hmm.
it's not the hormonal changes alone
Right.
that are producing caregiving behavior. It's sort of the combination of these hormonal changes, the experience of interacting with pups, and that really seems to lead to this consolidation.
It's re-sculpting circuits in ways that enable makes the female more sensitive to certain environmental stimuli like the vocalizations from the pups, the sensations of the pups, and all of those things. It's not necessarily turning on all of the maternal care behaviors wholesale. It's just making her more sensitive to inputs or increasing or decreasing certain behavioral tendencies she might have that are then further refined by experience. But then as she actually has experience with actual pups after they're born, she does get better at doing those things. You need experience to actually refine the behavior.